Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Assessment for Disability Friendliness on College Campuses. Dr. Anita Shorman, who is the Director of the Gerontology Program at the University of Louisiana at Monroe, will be our presenter for this session. And without further ado, Dr. Sharma, please go forward with your presentation.
Thank you, Bambi. And my apologies for just adjusting things and the volumes. College campuses or any educational institution, I think, is the best place to empower people with disabilities. And the sooner we start, the more empowering their life experiences can be. So I believe if we can start right from elementary school and then take them all the way to the college experiences, then we have created an equity that nothing else can do. Okay, education is the best way to create equity and inclusion for people with disabilities. So let me introduce my presentation. The purpose of this workshop is to assess the disability friendliness of college campuses so that the academic and social needs of students with ADA-defined disabilities can be identified and addressed. Educational institutions can empower students with disabilities by building upon their inherent resilience and by creating opportunities for advancement and self-reliance. So the idea behind a good, equitable education is to help a person become as independent as possible. And that applies to people with disabilities and without disabilities. Why would people seek education or higher education? So that they can become more independent in life, financially independent, socially independent, and more self-reliant. So the same principles would apply to anyone, whether they have a disability or not. So often students with disabilities become the invisible population in classrooms and in the campus community. The college environment becomes overwhelming for students who do not receive enough academic and social support. And I had not been aware of this invisibility of students with disabilities until I began to teach a course. I created a course about in 1998, 1999. So that was almost 23, 24 years ago. The course was social and emotional aspects of disabilities. So it was at that time we did not have virtual classrooms. So it was a face-to-face class. And the first day I went down, it was in first floor, I went down to the room and I was very excited because for the first time on our campus at ULM, we were teaching the class about becoming more aware of people with disabilities. So the first day I go to the class and after the introductions, I introduce myself, I get introductions from the students. And then the first question I ask them is, so how many of you have seen someone in a wheelchair on this campus? And I just threw that question there were about 30 students in that class. And I just threw that question. And then I waited. I thought, well, it's the first day of class. People would be shy, reluctant to talk. And a lot of times students are reluctant to talk. So I waited. Then again, I reworded it and asked again. So has anyone seen over here anyone in a wheelchair? Again, no response. And then one hand went up and said, I don't think there is anyone in a wheelchair on this campus. So I just looked at them. I said, do you really believe that there are 10,000 students on this campus and no one is in a wheelchair? Do you really believe that? Did you not notice, or do you think they are just not there? And then he said, well, I guess I did not notice. And then it hit me so hard that people with disabilities, the disability is so visible. Someone in a wheelchair would be so visible, and yet they were not noticed. And it really I was kind of stunned that how invisible the population can be. It just left me with a good baseline. Actually, it left me with a very good baseline to begin from where my class was. They really did not know a whole lot about it. Okay, let's see. So why is it not moving? Okay, ADA definition of disability, and I think I may be preaching to the choir over here by defining ADA definition. The ADA defines a person with a disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. This includes people who have a record of such an impairment, even if they do not currently have a disability. It also includes individuals who do not have a disability but are regarded as having a disability. The ADA also makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person based on that person's association with a person with a disability. So that is a very broad, comprehensive definition of a disability that includes practically everything that would affect a person's functionality in a given community, how they are perceived, how they are regarded, and how they're allowed, and I'm using the word allowed, how they're allowed to function within that community. And I'm very intentionally using community because of diversity. So if we take a global view of the word community, each community is different and unique. I was born, you may see I have a certain accent. So my accent is coming from my place of birth. I was born in India and I spent the first 20 years of my life in India. And growing up over there, this may kind of surprise you, but I really did not find it difficult to relate with people with disabilities. It could be because of my environment. I still remember very distinctly, the daughter of one of our neighbors was deaf and had major speaking impairments, could hardly talk, almost mute. And we were about 3 or 4 years old when I first became friends with her. And I still remember from when I was 4 years old, it was very easy for me to relate to her, very easy. And my mom, she never distinguished between the two of us. She treated us the same way. So it really was very difficult for me to understand that there was anything different about her. And as I moved up in school, in junior high, a new girl joined our class who had a very visible disability. She had major problems with her mobility. And it was very easy for me to become friends with her. She was extremely intelligent, very engaging, with a terrific sense of humor. And all that, what I remember is, all that I saw was that she was so much fun to be with. So I really was not able to see that there was anything different about her. And then a couple of incidents happened. Our classroom was located on the 3rd floor of the building. One day the elevator was not working, so we had to get down the stairs. And as my friend was going down the stairs, because of her very significant disability, it was very difficult for her to go down step by step. So she would go one step, sit down, go one step, sit down again. And our peers around us were laughing at her, because it was just so difficult. She was being pushed around because all of us were trying to get down the stairs at the same time. So she was being pushed and pulled. So I kind of held on to her hand and kind of helped her move towards a corner of that stairwell so that she could hold on to the banister and then come down. And that really made me angry. I think that day I was angry. I think I was hurting for her. It really made me angry. We were in 7th grade at that time. So I was kind of angry that anyone would laugh at someone who was not able to do what they were able to do for no fault of hers. It was not her fault that she had a disability. She was born with it. Even if it does not matter how someone has a disability, to have that insensitivity to laugh at someone who is trying to help themselves the best that they can totally left me speechless. Actually, I was left speechless. I just could not understand that. And those were excellent life lessons for me. I mean, those were lessons that I have never forgotten, even after all these decades. So disability is not only actual disability, it's also the perception and how that person is treated within their community. Now, COVID has brought in more distinctions on defining a disability. So non-COVID can be a disability under the ADA Section 504 and Section 155(7) if it substantially limits one or more major life activities. These laws and their related rules define a person with a disability as an individual with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities of such individuals. Actual disability. A person with a record of such an impairment, record of, all these are legal terms as defined by ADA, or a person who is regarded as having such an impairment, regarded as. So the key terms are actual disability, record of disability, and regarded as having a disability. So a person with long COVID has a disability if the person's condition or any of its symptoms is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And I learned that firsthand through my students that COVID has had major significant mental health problems with people. Those who were infected with it and those whose loved ones were infected with it were affected in a lot of different ways through their mental health. I saw a lot of depression, anxiety, fear among my students. Their class performance went down. And then because I work with older adults, what was going on in nursing homes was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking because of all the restrictions that had to be placed to protect older adults and their families and the people who were working in those facilities. The senior centers had to be closed down, so it resulted in a lot of isolation, which aggravated depression, aggravated anxiety for older adults and their loved ones. So 2020 and part of 2021 were eye-opening and extremely heartbreaking periods of time for those who were working with older adults or those who were working with people with disabilities. Okay, so bringing it back within the context of a college environment. So we have to begin with first things first, identification. Identification without discrimination. Okay. Would a faculty or staff or administrator know if a student has a disability? Because all disabilities are not visible. Are there signs and symptoms that would tell us that a student has a disability? Very often, faculty would know more about that because they are constantly interacting with their students. Some faculty are more vigilant, they're more observant than others. And also, it depends on the class size. The bigger the class, the less attention an individual student may receive. Would a student inform the instructor or staff that they have a disability? Okay. And as we move along this presentation, we will focus on that, how to make this more friendly for a person with a disability so that they feel empowered enough to walk up to you and tell you that I need help because I have a disability. Okay, should the instructor invite students to disclose a disability? There you may be walking a fine legal line, how much you can ask a student, how much you can expect for them to disclose to you, how much they want to disclose. So you have to be careful about walking that fine legal line. Okay. Identification would be followed by examination. Examine. To create an equitable and inclusive environment, it is important to actively examine the factors that would answer some of these questions. Now, I want to back up a little bit and talk about equity and inclusiveness. Again, most probably I'm preaching to the choir over here, but it's very important to define those terms because that would determine what kind of environment we want to create, identify the barriers, and identify the solutions. So what is equity? Equity is not the same thing as equality. Those are two different words and two different concepts. So equity is, if I take the example of running a race, okay, so we are all standing at the start line, ready to begin a race. Equity becomes an issue when some of us, because of our life circumstances, because of our backgrounds, because of the environment in which we were born, our start line is further up than the start line of the others in that race. So if someone is beginning from point X, then someone else could be beginning 100 yards or 200 yards, 400 yards further up than this person who is beginning at start line X. So that other person who is beginning their start line way further up will take some time and effort to come up to at par with the person who is starting the race at the start line at X. So that difference between this person starting from point Y and this person starting from point X is the lack of equity. That gap that we have created because of the kind of life circumstances that other person experienced, and this other person grew up in a more affluent, a more resourceful environment. That's where we had created the gap between two people. Okay. Another example could be, three kids who are trying to look over a wall. There's a football game going on and they're trying to watch that game over the wall. Okay. So someone could be tall enough to just look over the wall without needing any kind of support or any kind of steps or stairs, ladder. Someone else may need a step ladder to be able to look over the wall. Okay, so that's again the difference between people. Okay, some are tall enough to be able to look over without needing any support. Others may need the step ladder to be able to look over. So that is the difference in creating an equitable environment. If we provide that person with a step ladder, we have created equity. If we did not provide that and we say everyone is equal, all three of you are equal, we have created inequity. By trying to be fairly equal, we actually create inequity, that we are going to treat everyone the same. That's equality. Everyone should be treated the same without discrimination. Okay, great. However, you do have to keep in mind that some people do not begin their life race from the same point as others. They need some time to catch up on that starting point. And when you allow that time give them those resources to help them catch up with those resources with the start line. You provide them with the resources and help them come to the same start line as others. You have created equity. You have also created inclusion. Okay, by creating equity, you have created inclusion. So those are the concepts that you'll have to keep at the back of your mind when you're creating a disability-friendly environment on campus. So some of the questions we will need to examine are, is the student able to access what I'm offering? So you could be offering n number of services, but if a student is not able to access them, then those services are not useful for them. What is preventing the student to access what I'm offering? Are there feasible methods? And again, the key word is feasible. And I'll come to that once I'm done with the slide. Are there feasible methods that would allow me to make this service or activity more inclusive and accessible? So here's an example. If I look at my own university campus, okay, it is a very old university. We will be celebrating 100 years in about like 7 years. So at the time when these buildings were built, ADA had still not happened, okay? ADA today is 32 years old. So these buildings were built way back in early 1900, in 1931 was when the first building was built at ULM. Okay, so 1932, and so at that time we were not even aware that we needed to be ADA compliant. ADA did not exist. Okay, so at that time even the technology was very limited. We did not have the same kind of technology that we have now. So you will find on older campuses that there are buildings that are still ADA non-compliant. They may not have elevators, they may not have wheelchairs, slopes, they may not have sidewalks that are disability friendly, they may not have parking spaces. Okay, so feasible. In order to make these buildings ADA compliant, a lot of funding would be needed. I mean, we are talking about millions of dollars, okay? So until those millions of dollars become available, what do? It is not going to happen overnight, okay? You cannot make these buildings ADA compliant overnight. No one has a magic wand. So until that time that they can become ADA compliant, what do? We find feasible solutions. For example, we have a very old building on our campus that does not have an elevator. So whenever it is found, if it is discovered that someone in a course has a disability, they change the building and change the room. Okay. However, sometimes it takes some time to find out that a student has a disability in that course. So again, I'll go back and review this part and revisit this part when you begin to find feasible solutions to make things more disability friendly. So again, feasibility, because funding money becomes one of the biggest barriers to create a disability friendly environment. Okay, and then very important, am I willing? That's a very important word. Am I willing to take that extra step to make this service or activity accessible to the student? And that's where there's a difference between doing a job and doing a job with a passion. Okay, I mean, all of us are employed in our workplaces. Some of us work from 8 until 5. We get there at 8 and we take our lunch break. We get out at 5. So we kind of have very automated work lives. This is what I'm supposed to do. Within that framework, we are doing whatever we need to do without trying to be singled out for not doing a job. So when we become these automated employees, somewhere we lose that passion and that critical thinking. Am I doing something that would make me reach out to someone else outside of the framework of my job description? Okay, very often we forget that we have frameworks outside of our job descriptions. So am I willing to take that extra step to make this service or activity accessible to the student? And that's where we will have to think outside of the box, outside of a job job description frame and see how we can make things more disability friendly to enhance inclusiveness, to enhance an equitable environment. So that is a key word there, which I'll keep coming back to again and again. Mental health. Why do we forget mental health? Okay, mental health is not craziness. Okay, it's not your stereotype, stigma-inducing craziness, that people lose their senses, they lose their orientation, and they behave in a threatening way, in an intimidating way that you have to be scared of. That is not your typical mental health description of a mental health problem. Okay, so in a campus environment, people silently suffering with mental health issues. Depression is a silent killer. Okay, anxiety, and I can see anxiety coming out in my students when they're taking an exam, doing assignments. COVID had brought out a lot of anxiety in my students. Okay. At this point, I'm teaching virtual classes, but until recently, I was teaching face-to-face classes, and I do a whole lot of face-to-face presentations. And I'm going to use two examples without giving away the confidentiality, so I'm going to modify some of these case descriptions. So one time when I was teaching a course, it was on, interestingly, it was on social work, helping students understand what social work is. So we were chatting and I was describing different kinds of social work settings. And at the very end of the first, at the very end of the room, there was a student sitting in a corner who was just talking to themselves. So this is early 2000s. We did not have Bluetooth at that time. We did not have cell phones. So obviously they were not chatting on Bluetooth. They were not chatting on their cell phone. Okay, so they were just talking to themselves, and I was wondering what's going on. So I'm teaching and I'm noticing them, and I didn't say anything. At the end of the class, when we were done with the lecture, I just walked up to them and just asked them very friendly, and I said, "Hey, are you okay? Is everything okay?" They looked at me very blankly and they said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I said, "Well, I saw you talking, were you talking to someone sitting next to you? I didn't see anyone sitting next to you." And then, when they saw that I was really trying to reach out to them without judging them, without making them feel uncomfortable, after a few minutes, they began to talk and they said, "Well, I am on medication. I do have I do suffer from hallucinations, and for the past few days, I have not taken my medication because I cannot afford to buy it." So once I realized what the problem was, I referred them to the counseling center. The counseling center sent them to another mental health provider. They helped them buy the medication. So we pooled our resources together to help the student. Something very similar happened a couple of years later again. Unfortunately, I lost that student. They would not open up, and they felt extremely threatened when I asked them if they were doing okay, and they never returned to the classroom. I tried to do the follow-up through their student records, and we were not able to reach them. We just lost them, and I just felt extremely sad that we were not able to help the student because we did not have adequate records on the student. They had changed their address, so we were not able to trace the student. They dropped out of school, so we could not reach them through their courses, through their enrollment. So it was very sad. It was really sad. Is there a question? Could we just look at questions after I'm done with the presentation? And I need to hurry up a little bit. Unless it is something that you want to be answered immediately. Okay, so when you're looking at some of these issues, the barriers, if we have to identify the barriers, we have to identify the environments within which those barriers are occurring. So I've identified 7 environments within which we will have to find solutions. So on a college campus, you have the face-to-face classrooms, virtual classrooms, residential buildings, employee work areas, common access areas such as stairways, hallways, dining areas, campus restaurants, outdoor areas, parks, pathways, event arenas such as stadiums, parking lots. And number 7 is extremely interesting that I have identified. Self-perception, self-assessment, our inner environment. And it is not only our self-perception, our self-assessment, it is also how we are perceived by others. It's self-perception and perception by others. Okay. Some people feel extremely uncomfortable when they see someone with a disability. Okay. Some of us are very comfortable. Some of us don't know what to say, what to do, how to behave. And it comes out in our behavior, in our words, and it's very obvious that something is making us feel very uncomfortable. Also, some people feel uncomfortable to the extent that they become abusive to the person with a disability. So you might have heard, it's very common to see people with disabilities, students, young students with disabilities getting bullied in school environments. That is very common. It goes back to the example that I used earlier in my presentation where my friend, was trying to climb down the stairs, stair by stair, sitting down, taking the next step, and the students around us, my peers, my classmates were laughing at her. That is a form of bullying. Ridicule is a form of bullying, So at a very young age, students with disabilities begin to experience the negativity and the cruelty of their environment. So that the 7th environment is within us and within other people who are interacting with us. Okay, so once you identify these environments, become aware of these environments, then begins the process of reaching out. Okay, you first have to identify, examine, find out what the environments are, and then you begin to reach out. So I've identified basic principles of reaching out. 6 basic principles of reaching out to students with disabilities. Develop empathy, putting yourself into someone else's shoes, okay? And I developed an empathy in a variety of ways. One, because I was introduced to someone with a disability at a very young age. Also, grandparents, older adults in your families, as they're getting older, they are experiencing more problems with their mobility. So within your family, you get used to seeing someone having some kind of a disability. Okay. And then your own life experiences. A few years ago, I became very sick and it affected my well-being. I lost a whole lot of weight. It made it very difficult for me to walk. I had problems even crossing 1 inch high threshold of my doorway. Okay, I had become so weak that I had to have someone hold me, help me just getting in and out of doorways. I could not climb stairs. I was just extremely weak because of all the weight that I had lost because of I had pneumonia, and it had kind of it really made me I was declared in a critical state. And it made me extremely physically weak. It took me, several months to get back to my original weight and my original level of functioning. Okay, so sometimes you have to experience some things yourself to understand someone else's pain and someone else's distress. Okay, sometimes, they always say that you don't have to die to understand that. Sometimes you do have to experience some things in your life to understand someone else's pain. I really believe that. So that empathy becomes extremely important to understand the limitations someone else is experiencing because of their environment. Okay, help without becoming intrusive or patronizing. Okay, very important. Okay, very often people without disabilities become very patronizing towards those who have a disability. Assess our own mindsets and attitudes. How do we feel about disabilities? How do we react to people with disabilities? How do we perceive them? Do we see them as someone less as ourselves? So we really, if you want to develop empathy, you have to go back and look at your own attitudes. Become a part of the solution instead of being a part of the problem. Obviously, when you identify a problem, how do you deal with it? Does it upset you? Do you ignore it? Or do you actually come forward and find solutions, feasible solutions to something that you have identified as a problem? Replace disabled with enabled. That is very important. That is going to influence our mindset. How do we perceive? Do we see someone as disabled, or do we see someone who we can reach out to help them become enabled? So again, you might have noticed I have been using person first language, person with a disability, instead of saying disabled person. And there are a lot of controversies and arguments on the right usage of words. Okay, I think we have still not reached a consensus on what to say and how to address people with disabilities. Some would say this is okay, then there is the politically correct term, differently abled. Some people say it's okay to call someone disabled. Personally, from my point of view, and this is my internal environment, my mindset, my internal environment that is telling me that calling someone disabled is not right. To me, that feels that you have disenfranchised, disempowered someone when you call them disabled. Okay, a computer is disabled. A car gets disabled when it stops working. Okay, objects are disabled when they stop working. Okay, not able to work anymore. That's what disabled is, not able to work anymore. So personally, I really have a problem with that word, disabled. So I very consciously, I always use that person first language. A disability should not define a person. The person should define who they are. We should not define it for them. Okay. And creating opportunities. You don't have to do it in a big way. You can do small things with big results. Okay. So creating opportunities. Okay. So I want to make sure if there are any questions, I'm addressing those.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. We had one question.
Could you I'm not able to hear you properly. Could you have that volume a little bit higher, please?
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I'm not able to hear you properly.
I don't know. I have. Can you hear me now?
I'm still not able to hear you.
Bianca, the interpreter, can you hear me?
Let me see if there's something wrong with my settings. I want to make sure, because I'm barely able to hear you.
Okay, so maybe whenever you made the adjustment at the beginning, you had adjusted also the volume of your speakers.
Okay.
Okay, are you making adjustments? I'll keep talking just so.
Okay, let's try this again. Yes, okay, let's try this.
Can you hear me?
I can, but it's much better than before.
Okay, so the question from Jim is accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion is about accommodations. Aren't accommodations just common sense and common courtesy?
Well, that's a good one. Common sense. It's surprising how many people don't have common sense. It is very surprising. Okay. Here is an example of common sense. Okay. So very often, you're getting into a door and you see someone struggling with a door. Okay, so common sense would say, that you help that person with the door. Even if you don't see them as someone with a disability, common sense will say, help them. And this is what I've seen myself. People don't do that. Okay, they would see someone struggling, opening the door, closing the door, picking up some things in the grocery aisles, and they don't step forward to help them. Okay, so accommodations. It's an excellent point that you have brought up, because you don't have to make a big song and a dance about providing accommodations sometimes. Sometimes they're there, you just have to make them visible, reach out, and make those accommodations reachable to the person. Okay, simple things, teaching. Okay, so someone who is having problems with their eyesight, they have a problem, they have visual impairments. Okay, so you can help them find a place in the room, in the classroom, where they're able to see the blackboard, they're able to see others. It's just creating a space in that room where things become more accessible to them. Okay, in virtual classrooms, okay, all our courses have to be evaluated through Quality Matters. That is a standardized evaluation tool we use to evaluate our courses. So one of the things in that, one of the sections in that is assessing the course for accessibility. Okay, so again, common sense would say, don't use fonts that are difficult to use. Don't use background colors that are difficult to see. I mean, if you look at this presentation, I've used very bold, maroon, black colors that would be very visible to people. I've used a font that would be easy to read. I have used spaces between sentences, not overcrowded the slides. This is common sense. So yes, I mean, I think that is something that we will have to remind people again and again, to use common sense when creating accommodations.
So also just a statement, accommodations are very individual. One size does not fit all. Students need to develop their own skills to find out what works for them to be successful, and not pick from a menu of things that work for someone else.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, you have hit the nail on the head. Accommodations are always individualized. Okay, what works for one person is not the same for someone else. Okay, and I've seen that in my own self. I mean, all of us are very, very unique individuals, and we like things in a certain way. And so what I do in my courses is that I ask a very straightforward question. Okay, the very first day in the orientation, I ask a very and it's a written orientation. So I ask a very straightforward question in the written orientation. You tell me what kind of help you will need from me, the kind of accommodations you will need from me. If you have any special needs, you will need to tell me. Okay, you tell me what your special needs are so that I can make this course more accessible to you. Okay, so again, it goes back to using that common sense. Okay, so for example, here is a very top of my head example. Very often when I have made now, you will not see this in this presentation, but I'm not a very tall person. I'm barely 5 feet tall. Okay, so I always have problems, with reaching things up that are up high on the shelves. One of our classrooms had a huge TV, gigantic TV, and someone who did not have common sense had put the VCR on top of the TV. Instead of putting it on a side table, they had put it on top of the table. So because I am short, I could not reach that VCR to be able to show the videos to my class. Interestingly, that was a class on disabilities. How ironic a situation can be. So I always had to either ask a tall student to help me or subject myself to ridicule. And students can sometimes be very insensitive. Young people can be insensitive. So very often I had to subject myself to the ridicule by bringing in a bench to stand up on to insert the video into that VCR. So finally I went to administration. I said, you need to do something about this. At that time, I was not as assertive. I was kind of new. Now I would have changed the environment completely. Now that I've become more assertive, I'm able to speak up and point out things when they're not right. Okay, so if that had happened now, I would have changed that entire classroom environment. Okay, so yes, it is very individualized. You know, you have to check, you have to create a relationship with the student where you're able to assess what their individual needs are. You know, you cannot use the same criteria for every student, that if this worked for this student, it will work for that. No, it will not. Okay, any other questions?
We do not have any other questions. Right, oh, something just popped up.
Any comments, anything that anyone in this audience experienced and they would like to share, you know, when they were a student or are a student and they identified something that really needs to be changed or addressed, something that you would like to bring up that we can focus on as a group?
So Jim made a comment that students need to be assertive with their teachers and the programs that are supposed to help them. Mm-hmm. And also, just one thing that I have recently, a friend of mine whose son graduated regular diploma path, but he has autism and is enrolling in a college in the fall, and he went to sign up for services at the Disability Services Office at that campus, and was told that he would need some medical professional assessments. Now, she said, I thought it was just the IEP, and then kind of went back and forth and had talked to different people. But basically, it could be the last school evaluation, which includes assessment, which could include, unless the parents waive, to have the full 3-year triennial assessments done. But they could have all of those certified professional assessments that should be done in that reval to be provided to the college campus. However, what this student was initially told by the Disability Service Office was that they needed to go to these professionals and get these assessments done. And it just seemed like there should have been some clearer instructions. I mean, this Disability Service Office deals with students every day. So it seems like they could have just made the caveat that you potentially could have what you need within your last reevaluation in school if you had an IEP.
Yes, and I think what we will have to work on that is the policy, you know, the institutional policies at universities. And I think we still have a long way to go in creating some of those policies that will allow the transition from one education setting to another education setting to be more smooth and less disruptive. You know, if all of that data is available at the time that a person is moving from high school to the college environment, or from one education setting to another education setting, and all of that, those assessments, evaluation, records are immediately available, accessible, the transition can become so much smoother. And also, very important, extremely important is, all of us need to be talking in the same language. And that's where the training becomes even more important in college environments. They may not be familiar with the language that special educators may be using or the evaluators may be using, the IEP evaluators may be using. So that training becomes extremely important because sometimes, as you may have seen in high schools, people who are handling these officers and these positions may not be trained to handle those. For example, a math teacher teaching PE in high schools or a PE teacher teaching chemistry. Okay, so very often individuals who are handling these positions may not have been prepared to deal with these transitions appropriately. So somewhere we need to introduce some policy changes and introduce some trainings before they begin to work with these students. Okay, so that is part of reaching out. So when we are doing assessments of a college environment to see how disability friendly it is, we will have to assess all components, all aspects of college life. To give you an example, one of my students, non-traditional students who is enrolled in my gerontology program, he is 61 years old and he wanted his grandson, he brought his grandson to campus, who had autism, or so he identified, and he said, I'm enjoying this environment and I would like my grandson to be over here. So because he was part of raising that grandson, and because he was experiencing some disabilities himself, he came to the campus first and he assessed some of these components himself, to help his grandson make the decision about which university to enroll in. Now, all parents, all caregivers will not be aware of this. Okay, they may not do the assessment themselves. Okay, they will rely on the college officials to be able to help them make their transition. Okay, so again, I think we really need to keep focusing on initiating policies or changing current policies to make them more disability friendly and create, in social work, we use the word case management. I don't want to use the word case management over here, but what I would like to use is coordination. Okay, what we need is a better coordination between and among all the professionals working with that student, with an individual, including their families. The family would be part of that coordination team, where we can have a sort of a student management team, where they can talk the same language, not have to begin from the beginning and then, kind of move forward with all the information that they have. How does that sound? Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Let's see, what else do we have?
I really want to go back and look at these environments. This is where the assessment needs to happen. Assessing the classrooms, okay, to see. One of the things that college campuses can do is, before the semester begins, they can find out how many students in a particular course would need accommodations. And they need to have some kind of a form or some kind of a disclosure instrument where a student can confidentially disclose that these are the kind of accommodations they will need. Usually we find out about the needed accommodations once the semester has started. Then we get a note from the counseling center. So it will help me personally, if I say from a faculty point of view, that if I'm provided information a few weeks before the semester begins, I can make sure that my syllabus, my course, policies, the way I set up the course, if it is a virtual course, all would accommodate the special needs of each student. So that is something that we can do in those classroom settings. Residential buildings, again, assessment, identifying the barriers. So we will have to, where again, to begin from the beginning, we will have to create these assessment tools, again, not complicated, simple, very simple assessment tools to see, what are the barriers that would impact an inclusive environment in that given setting. Residential buildings, are all the elevators working? Are there enough parking spaces for a person with a disability? Employee work areas, employees with disability, what kind of work areas they have, okay? Stairways, hallways, someone needs to be checking those elevators all the time. Are they working? A lot of times no one tells the maintenance crew that the elevator is not working. Okay. Dining areas, are the special tables, special chairs that would accommodate someone with special needs. A lot of problems in outdoor areas. A lot of times students with disabilities cannot participate in some of those wonderful, happy activities because of issues of accessibility.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. We're at the end of our time for this session, but we really appreciate all the valuable information that you have shared with us. Do you have any closing remarks before?
I just want to say that if anyone wants to reach out to me, my email address is asharma, Anita Sharma. Again, I'll just go to the beginning of my slides. You can see my name. So that's A Sharma at ulm.edu. And I just feel that it really is up to us how innovative and how willing we are to create a more inclusive environment. Okay, it will not happen by itself. It will not happen overnight. It will take significant amount of efforts and will take willingness on each of our parts to create that inclusive environment.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, and I'm putting your email in the chat for everyone. And again, we thank you for this presentation and participating in our conference.
Thank you so much for letting me talk about this subject. This is so close to my heart. So sometimes I kind of become way too passionate. So if I did that, I just feel that we are the change agents and we can bring in the change. Thank you so much.
We love passion, so thank you. Appreciate it. Our next session will be at